eighth one for the day, our eighth finalist, Coral Vita, Sam Teacher.
All right, I'm the last one between us and food and drink, so let's get to it. My name is Sam Teacher. I'm the founder and chief reef officer of Coral Vita, a company that grows corals to restore dying reefs. So many of us know coral reefs is one of the most magnificent ecosystems on the planet, but they're also one of the most important. There's over 1 billion people around the world that depend on reefs for food and their livelihoods. 1/4 of all marine life depends on coral reefs, and conservatively, they generate $30 billion a year through tourism, fisheries, and coastal protection. Unfortunately, all that value is lost by reefs dying. Over the past several decades, we've lost half of the world's reefs. This is all around the world, from the Florida Keys to Australia. And what we're seeing now is this is not just a problem that's affected us through pollution and coastal sedimentation and overfishing, but also a problem for the future and of right now, as we're projected to lose 90% of the world's reefs by 2050. And the big news over the past several years was that half the Great Barrier Reef bleached, and most of it died in that bleaching area due to rises in ocean temperatures. To put this all in perspective, we are currently at a rate of losing 2.5 football fields worth of reef every minute, threatening all that wonderful biodiversity, as well as all the value that reefs sustain around the world. Fortunately, there is a solution. Coral farming has been shown to revitalize the health of reefs so they can continue sustaining the benefits they provide to countless people around the world. I myself helped found a UN-funded coral farm while I was living in Mauritius, where we were able to work with local fishermen, students, and see these communities come back to a once barren lagoon and setting up their traps just 100 yards away from our restoration site because there were so many more fish. It's something that has shown how degraded sites that have been devoid of life for years can be brought back to life in the right conditions. It's really quite remarkable. The problem is, in this space, that traditionally those types of coral farming projects, like the one I did in Mauritius, are funded by one-off grants and donations. They're underwater, which leads to a whole range of different scaling issues. You can only grow a limited species of corals, like the ones we see here, ones that are branching and grow fast, which misses out on a ton of critical species diversity. There's little you can do to enhance the resiliency of the corals to threats such as warming and acidifying oceans. When events happen, like a ship grounding, an anchor is being dropped by a fisherman, or a big storm comes through, the entire project is threatened. And you have to set up and maintain each of these nurseries near every reef you want to restore. And when we consider 28 million square hectares of reef around the world, that's just not really practical. So right now, we see that there's a solution possible, but that the current model for restoration needs significant improvement so that we can ensure that reefs stay alive throughout the future and that they continue providing the benefits for people all around the world. That's why at Coral Vita, we are revolutionizing the space by rolling out a commercial model for coral reef restoration through land-based coral farming. We're able to integrate breakthrough methods developed by our advisors that allow us to strengthen the resiliency of corals, supply restoration projects at a large scale, and integrate a range of diversities that are important for helping holistically revive coral reefs. So to start, we use the process known as microfragmenting, developed by Dr. David Vaughn of the Moat Marine Lab, one of our advisors, where we can now grow corals up to 50 times faster. Now, for perspective, those corals I mentioned before, the branching corals, they can go from a cutting the size of your thumb to hand and wrist in 6 to 9 months. A lot of these really important bouldering species might take 20, 30, 50 years to get the size of a dinner plate. This coral you see here should be 20 or 30 years old, and it was grown in 6 months. So this allows us to grow not only a greater range of species, which are really important for really helping revive this reef health, but also do it more cost effectively and much faster. As well, we're integrating methods known as assisted evolution to strengthen the resiliency of corals to threats like warming and acidifying oceans. And we often get asked, what's the point of going out there and planting these corals if they're just going to die? And it's a really important question. So a lot of this research being done is still ongoing. But what we do know is with our land-based farms, where we have these raceway tanks that we're pumping clean seawater through, we can modify the conditions, such as temperature or pH, to reflect predictions for the future and effectively train our corals so that when they're outplanted, they can survive oceans of the future. And this has already been shown to boost the survivability of corals during recent El Nino bleaching events in places like the Florida Keys where our advisors work. Now, on the issue of scaling, right now looking at a country like the Bahamas, it's a pretty wide range, lots of reefs there. If you wanted to use the traditional system for coral farming, you'd have to set up and maintain these underwater nurseries near every reef you want to restore. With a land-based farm, we have the potential to supply an entire nation's reefs with more diverse, resilient, and cost-effective coral from a single site. What we're also seeing right now is this model is shifting. So thinking about the underpinning of the current model by grants and donations, the market for reef restoration is nascent but getting ready to grow. The Australian government just recently committed hundreds of millions of dollars to protecting the Great Barrier Reef, which includes about 100 million Australian dollars for reef restoration. The Seychelles recently worked out a deal with debtor nations to forgive that foreign debt in exchange for investments in conservation, in resiliency, in sustainable development projects, specifically ones like coral reef restoration. And right now, Swiss Re, the second largest reinsurance company in the world, looking at the coastal protection values of reefs, is piloting a scheme where hotel owners in Mexico who pay for restoration can see their insurance premiums drop, which is an incredible market driver for helping scale up these types of restoration efforts. So looking at Coral Vita's business model, there's two revenue buckets that we're projecting moving forward. Again, looking at that tourism, fisheries, coastal protection value of reefs, we're looking at all the customers who have skin in the game, who benefit from those values, and they would hire us for restoration. So if you're a hotel owner that caters to scuba and snorkel tourists, if you're a government with national economic interests or food security interests in the health of your reefs, anyone who benefits from this could hire Coral Vita to restore these reefs so you continue to benefit moving forward. As well, with the land-based coral farming model, in addition to letting us grow more diverse, resilient corals, it's also much more accessible than the traditional ocean-based farms. So as we grow corals for restoration projects, we're turning these farms into ecotourism attractions, where people can come pay to visit our farms, learn about what's happening to the reefs, hopefully tell the story about what's happening to reefs once they leave, adopt corals, plant them with our teams, have this experience, as well as also having an educational experience at the same time, which will be afforded not just to tourists, but local communities, students who live in the areas where we're working. Right now, we are piloting in Grand Bahama. We're working with the Grand Bahama Port Authority, which effectively has jurisdiction as a sort of quasi-governmental as well as real estate development group for half the island of Grand Bahama. And they saw us aligning directly with their vision for sustainable development. They know the value of reefs when it comes to the tourism industry for snorkelers and scuba divers, as well as helping shelter coastlines against storms. So they've given us free land next to their canal system with amazing water quality. They've helped us through the whole permitting process, and it's a great partner for us to scale moving forward as we look at the value that reefs provide to groups like these. And we'll be setting up this first farm, which we raised a seed round for, in Grand Bahama, and I had to upload this last week, and if I had a few extra days, I actually would have thrown up a picture of me on top of a bulldozer, because we started construction on this farm last week. Just bringing it back again, thinking about how important these reefs are for a country like the Bahamas and extrapolating that out to the 100 countries and territories around the world with reefs, they are critical. And if they die, these countries and the people who live in them will suffer, along with the loss of some of the world's most magnificent wildlife. So another key part of our model is looking at the communities who depend on these reefs most. So as we do this restoration work, as we're building out the commercial model, we're also going to be integrating the local communities as much as possible. And there's a wide range of steps that we'll take to do this. This includes opening up, as I mentioned before, to local students who can come learn about marine science at our farm, training local fishermen to be part of our coral dive planting team, and ideally we would love the farm manager to be a trained reef scientist from this country, so that as we scale all around the world, this is something that's going to bring on board the people who benefit most from the reefs. Considering the Sustainable Development Goals, I think 14 obviously comes to mind the most, but we're working with education, helping people fight against hunger, economic development partnerships. There's a wide range of different Sustainable Development Goals that our work is touching on. So as far as our timeline, we're launching this pilot farm in Grand Bahama this year. We have about 2 years of funding to help get things going there as we look to scale up around the Caribbean and around the world. And so in about 2020, we'll raise a Series A round to finance the creation of our first large-scale coral farm, where we can grow hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of coral fragments each year at our farm, which is an unprecedented figure that has never been done before. With our ultimate vision to have coral farms in all of the countries and territories around the world with reefs. So looking forward, we're already building out a pipeline in Mexico, Costa Rica, Colombia, as well as Saudi Arabia, Australia, the Seychelles, looking at where are the places that need restoration the most, where people are willing to pay, and where we can operate next. And considering this from a global perspective at our price point, if we were going to look at NOAA has a target goal of restoring 5% of the world's reefs. And that may not seem like a lot, but you got to keep in mind, just like with reforestation projects, if we plant the corals, these corals have been shown to reproduce sexually in the wild. And so by doing 5%, you actually can help see the restoration project continue onwards as the corals can help stabilize their populations and grow from there. So at our price point, this is about a $100 billion market opportunity. So we're not only looking to do this as a for-profit because we think that we can make money, that obviously is a good thing, but we really believe that the way to scale up reef restoration, to protect reefs, is to prove out this economic value so that the people who depend on them will actually pay to protect them, that it's not something that's reliant on very limited small-scale grants from a dwindling pool of resources. So at that scale, we're looking at those schemes like debt for adaptation swaps, like that reinsurance policy down in Mexico, all of these emerging fields of conservation finance that can help the people who depend on reefs to pay for this type of restoration work. At that scale, we believe we can have a tremendous amount of impact to help restore reefs, where, as I said before, we can be growing millions of corals. And within a decade, if we were going to have large-scale farms in every country, which is a very big goal, but we do believe is realistic, we think NOAA's target goal can be met within a decade. What the Ocean Exchange can do is help us achieve our vision of bringing this model to the rest of the world while also ensuring that the communities who depend on these reefs come along with us. So first and foremost, using this model with breakthrough science, a portion of the funds can be used to help finance research and development projects that we have underway that can help improve the way that we grow corals, the way that they're outplanted, to ensure that when we're using native corals, we're always doing the best not only to ensure that there's ecological functionality, but that we can do it cheaper, that we can do it at a better scale, that we can really do holistic reef restoration to benefit the health of these ecosystems. As well, it'll help us scale our model globally. This is something that we need to take to many places, and there's a very narrow window for us to do this. I don't know if people saw the report today by the IPCC, but we now, it looks like, have until 2030 to really avert catastrophic climate change, to get us to those temperature thresholds. And when it comes to coral reefs, even if we achieve those goals, a lot of that temperature is already locked into the ocean. So I'll be the first one to say that the best thing to do for coral reefs is to stop killing them. But we're at the point now where we need adaptation solutions, where we need restoration rolled out quickly to ensure that these reefs stay alive for future generations. And finally, a very big ambition of ours is not only to do this work to help reefs in general, but also that by doing this, we can help prove out that mission-driven for-profits have the potential to really help the world, and that doing this work can not only drive a resurgence in ecosystem health and in the coral reef space, but also help with ecosystem restoration all around the world and help jumpstart an economy that helps people while also helping the environment. A little bit more about our team. As I mentioned before, I helped start a UN-funded coral farm while I was living in Mauritius. I also worked on climate change adaptation policy at the White House, as well as worked for the Global Island Partnership, a coalition of island nations and others who are working to build resilient island communities all around the world. My co-founder, Gator, which is really his name, he and I met and became friends at the Yale School of Forestry and Environmental Studies, where we were getting our master's degree. Both have a shared passion for the ocean. He grew up in San Diego. I've been a scuba diver since I was a kid. There's nothing more than we love than being in the waves. Gator worked on international development projects in Peru, Brazil, and South Africa, as well as a fellow for the World Wildlife Fund's Global Marine Program. And the third member of our team right now is Stephen Ranson, our Chief Science Officer, who formerly built and ran the state of Hawaii's coral restoration program and has over a decade of experience in coral husbandry. We're advised by two of the world's leading coral scientists, Dr. Ruth Gates and Dr. David Vaughan. I mentioned their work before. Dr. Gates is helping pioneer the field of assisted evolution to strengthen coral resiliency to climate change, and Dr. Vaughan discovered the microfragmenting method to grow corals up to 50 times faster. We also are working with Tom Chi, former co-founder of Google X, who's helping us on a lot of our rapid prototyping and R&D work, as well as environmental business advisors Will Hovey and Andrew Perlman. In addition to starting our pilot farm and raising the seed round of $1.5 million, we are now getting ready actually next week to pitch at the X Prize, where they are hosting a summit, and one of their design categories is saving coral reefs. And just last month, Gator actually was recognized as one of the United Nations Young Champions of the Earth. We know how much coral reefs matter. And as reefs die, people suffer. We know that the best thing to do is to stop killing them. We know that we have the power to solve this. And we know that by doing large-scale coral reef restoration, we can ensure that these amazing ecosystems are alive for future generations. And we invite you, the Ocean Exchange, and everyone out there watching to be part of this journey with us. And we look forward to you coming down to plant corals with us sometime soon. Thank you very much.
"15 minutes to the second." Well done. So, questions? Everybody ready? Over here.
Good. Well, you got a question for everyone.
I do, but well, I'll get to mine.
Hi, can you talk a little bit about the actual planting process? How do you make sure that the corals actually stick and that they thrive in wherever you're planting?
Yeah, it's a great question. So there's a few ways of going about doing it, but typically scuba gear or snorkel gear. I'm usually wearing a bathing suit instead of a business suit. Going down with drills, epoxy glue that's not harmful to the corals. If there's existing substrate, going down and drilling holes into that rock and literally gluing the corals into place. It is fairly labor intensive right now. That's definitely one of the things I mentioned on our R&D stuff that we're looking at helping scale up, whether that's through robotics, a mechanical arm that can help outplant corals. But by and large, that's how it's done all around the world right now.
He was there first. Do you have proprietary IP here, or are you counting on a first mover advantage?
We've got no IP right now. All these techniques are open sourced. We don't usually speak about first mover advantage, but right now we are the only commercial land-based coral farming company in the world. Most of the people who are working in this space are small NGOs or nonprofits, as well as marine research institutes. We actually see a lot of opportunities more for sort of co-opetition with them. There's a number of ways we envision where if we have a farm up and running, they could use their limited grant dollars rather than having to set up a new nursery, actually buying our more diverse and resilient coral, having more impact with their dollars. We could contract out the dive installation to them. But no, right now there's no IP, and there's so much also, I would say, of a problem with reef restoration that we also don't expect to be the only ones doing this. This is something that's going to require a tremendous collaborative effort, but we are hoping that by demonstrating not only the impact of restoration, but the potential profitability behind it, that'll actually incentivize more people to come into the space so we can help protect reefs together.
Let's just go back and forth.
We'll keep you moving up there, yeah. The way you guys are doing, you're picking up coral now that multiplies, and you're picking the coral that's now, which the one that has survived for the higher temperatures better than the ones that died 20 years ago. You are in a way selecting cultures that are more temperature tolerant than they were before. Is that something that you guys contemplated in doing? Is there anything that you do in the multiplication process that would allow you to pick colonies that are more tolerant to heat given the situation they're in?
It's something we are definitely paying attention to. I mentioned before, so we're always using native corals. So if we're in the Bahamas, corals found in the Bahamas, Australia, Australian corals. But in addition to being cognizant of species, we also are being cognizant of genetic diversity. Another advantage offered by the land-based farming system is we have the potential, if it's large scale, to grow every species of corals that's there, which is very exciting. We obviously will be sort of paying attention to which ones initially at first have the most importance for the local ecosystem, that do have a sort of heat-tolerant gene. But we also want to make sure that there are trade-offs, because if you're selecting corals that you're only choosing for heat tolerancy, maybe they don't have a resistance against white band disease. So there's actually a lot of research going on that space. Dr. Gates is helping lead that, as well as researchers around the world. So we're constantly looking at their research. How can we collaborate? How can we work together to integrate that so that we aren't making the wrong trade-offs as we do this work?
Let's go on this side over here, Jane.
So I just want to focus my question on two kinds of ocean problems and ask whether your reef restoration plans can deal with both of them or only the first of these. So the general ocean condition that's threatening reefs so terribly is warming seas, it's warming temperatures. And that, I take it, you're responding to through the growth mechanisms that you have. But then there are local conditions that are extremely toxic to reefs, and the one that I'm going to mention is the one that I'm most concerned about, and that's the new mining tailings that the Queensland government is sending into the water because they've decided to build a giant coal mine right at the edge of Queensland with Chinese backing. That's enormous, and it's enormously threatening to the reef. So my question is, does the reef work that you're doing by way of restoration have ways of dealing with specific conditions such as that one, or is it the general condition only that you're able to respond to?
I'll answer with an analogy, and then I'll go into detail a bit more. We had a hotel that saw us as a great sort of move for their venture, right? We'll have a reef restored right offshore, perfect for attracting dive and snorkel tourists, PR, filling room nights, the whole thing. Problem was, next to their beach was a river, and upstream was a textile factory. There's nothing we can do about that. So we are very cognizant in site selection. Not every reef can be restored. So we're ideally working in places where marine protected areas are being put into place, ridge to reef development. The right steps are being taken to help mitigate the damages going into place against the reefs. So with all of that in mind, I think that sort of sums up your question is no, we're not going to work in every place. But again, another sort of hope that we have, and we're already starting to see this with some of the people we're talking to who aren't customers yet but are expressing interest, is that by demonstrating the reef coming back to life and also all the value that corresponds with that, that would be an incentive to put those protections in place to begin with, to not kill the reef, because like, wow, this is so valuable. Why are we continuing to destroy this valuable resource?
Right, got it. Okay, great, thanks.
On the other side, one more.
Hi. Couple of questions on the economics. What kind of research have you done to determine that there's a market for ecotourism where people will actually come and pay? And then secondly, what have you done to test out the theory about hotel operators and tour operators being willing to make these investments other than having the insurance drive it, which I think is brilliant?
Yeah. So I mentioned construction started last week. We haven't yet launched our coral farm. We already have people paying to adopt corals as holiday gifts, as something they just believe in, whatever it may be.
Pet rocks.
Yeah. Adopt a panda, adopt a star, adopt a highway, adopt a coral. So this port authority that we're partnered with in Grand Bahama, they've introduced us to some of the cruise lines and shipping companies, the ecotourism operators on the island, all of whom are tremendously excited about us setting up shop there. So we're already seeing commitments come in that space, as well as just from individuals. People want to adopt corals. When can I come down, plant corals with you guys, that whole thing. Not from Coral Vita's perspective, but other reef restoration projects that already exist in Bonaire, in the Indian Ocean, Southeast Asia, people like Four Seasons and other major hotel chains, as well as boutiques, are already paying to do restoration projects. They see all the value in it. We're also seeing interest from some national governments, the World Bank, sort of a diversity of different potential customers, either are already paying for, again, not from us, or expressing interest to us in wanting our service once we get past the pilot stage.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.